Kaliningrad, a small piece of Russia right in the middle of Europe, enclosed between Poland and Lithuania, an exclave that to this day holds enormous significance because of its location. Kaliningrad is a base for nuclear warheads and Russia's access to the Baltic Sea. There lies Russia's only port that remains ice-free in winter, but this area has not always been Russian. For almost 700 years, Kaliningrad was called Königsberg and was part of the German-speaking and cultural area. Königsberg was one of the most important cities in the German East and was even part of the German Empire. How German is Kaliningrad now and what have Russians done with it over the past 70 years? You can see that and much more in this video.
A warm welcome, friends. I greet you from Kaliningrad, or should I say, from Königsberg. This city and oblast were under German control for over 700 years. That means this area was both linguistically and culturally German. That means we have a strong German heritage in this city, and that's what I want to show you today. Follow me through the German heritage of Russia. Follow me through Kaliningrad. Of course, you don't have to look for long. Right in front of us, we have the Königsberg Cathedral, a beautiful German church that was probably completely destroyed during World War II, but was very well rebuilt. And yes, it directly reminds us of the German past. And you notice that not only in the church, but also in the clergy, in the intellectuals who are buried here in the city. In front of the church, both Julius Rupp, a German thinker, and Immanuel Kant, one of the most famous philosophers, are buried. He was born here, grew up here, and died here. He never even left Kaliningrad. But
why are so many Germans buried here? The history of Königsberg begins in the 13th century. Originally, a Baltic people lived here. The Teutonic Order arrived, conquered, and Christianized the area. In 1255 they founded Königsberg. From then on, the region became increasingly German. Merchants, farmers, and craftsmen arrived from the west, churches and castles were built, and Königsberg soon became a major Baltic Sea trading center. Later, the city became the capital of East Prussia, the heart of the German East. For centuries, Königsberg was a hub of German culture and science. And that's exactly why you can still find so many traces of the past and so many German graves here today.
of course, this city attracts a huge number of tourists from Russia. Domestic tourism is very, very strong here, because Russians can experience European or even German culture here without having to leave their country, without having to deal with all those visa hassles. That's why you see huge groups of tourists here in the city. I'll show you the next German part of the city in a moment, but before that, I want to talk to you about a somewhat more sensitive topic. Traveling through a city like Kaliningrad may look casual and relaxed in the video, but it actually requires a lot of effort behind the scenes. Planning the video, the storyline, booking hotels, flights, and so on. This invisible pressure is called mental load, and many of you likely experience it daily. You have to function, but it drains you inside. Breaks often already feel like a luxury or a waste of time, and you feel like you even have to earn these breaks. After we've now been here at the Königsberg Cathedral, I want to show you the fisherman's village, the German fisherman's village, which is still well preserved, or rather, was rebuilt. It's a reconstruction, of course. Everything here was bombed to rubble and ashes. That means it was recreated. But as I said, we're now going into the German fisherman's village, which is beautiful, with half-timbered houses and a German flair. It may sound odd, but in Kaliningrad you instantly feel at home and safe. You see these German half-timbered houses? You instantly feel a unique familiarity not found in other cities. When you arrive in Moscow, you notice Soviet, sometimes brutal architecture, and a different climate. Here the climate feels more European, German, and that's pretty cool, yeah? You arrive immediately without needing to adjust. I really have to say, this part of the city feels more German than most German cities I've lived in over the past few years. So if you compare Mannheim with Kaliningrad, I think most people would say, as you can see behind me, this city feels even more German than Germany. Very clean, well kept and calm. If you want to live in Germany, so to speak, but want this extra cleanliness and so on, then you have a German city here in Eastern Europe, I'd say. On the other hand, I'm here now, also in the German center. For example, the Soviets, the Russians also built a lot of block buildings afterwards. So we'll talk about the Soviet history later. Then, of course, we'll see that not everything looks like it does here in the center.
Of Russia. I just heard I studied German, and so I heard it and thought, is it true or not?
Yes, it's true. Yes, well, I wanted to see how German is here, how the architecture is and so on. It's very beautiful here, yes.
You were building...
Well, yes.
You were building...
Well, you live and work here? No.
You probably don't know. It's just that this is a city
What's the name of the city?
Kirov. It's 2,500 kilometers from here. By plane.
It's just a vacation now.
Yes, vacation. I wanted to say it's raining here. Can you take a picture with her? She, you see, sounded English, and I said, well, you speak, as they say, in German. I said, it seems like it's German. She says to him, you'll take a picture together. You can do it.
Well, together?
Or what? Yes, with her.
Okay, fine.
What's her name?
You speak in German? No.
In English. Yes.
I want to ask, does this city feel more like Russia to you, or more like Europe?
More like Europe, yes, more like Europe. It's somehow different here than in Russia.
Although,
The Russian people, as they say, are always the same. Your architecture remains here, and new houses are still being built, which you can see for yourself.
it's funny, yes, there are German looks, but everywhere it's just Russians.
Yes. Not here. Actually, the Germans built it, and they built it very well to last for centuries. Yes, and very beautiful.
Yes, thank you.
Goodbye.
Nice people. I don't know why they wanted to take a picture with me, because they didn't know my blog or anything. But, well, you really do have nice cafes everywhere, and they're affordable. And, yeah, this peace and quiet, it's really amazing. I really like it here. And yeah, I'll show you what I mean by affordable now. The breakfast here is a great deal. I was here yesterday, and I'll show you again. You live here, right? Yeah. And for you, does it feel more like a Russian neighborhood or a European one?
It...
Just a few houses. It's 30% who were German understood. That's also a German house. That's one that stayed.
It's so terrible that we bombed here. But that's a weapon, that happens, right?
War is bad, yes, and now there's a war that's also going badly. We've been in Amsterdam for 3 years.
Lived in the East? Probably yes.
8 million Ukrainians, more than 8 million, have left the country. That was the Berlin Guest House. Now it's called the Berlin Guest House.
During World War I, Königsberg became a focal point just a few kilometers from the Russian border. Russian troops entered East Prussia but were repelled at the 1914 Battle of Tannenberg. Königsberg stayed under German control, but the eastern threat was clear. Following the war, the Treaty of Versailles separated East Prussia from Germany. The Polish corridor separated the province from the Reich, isolating Königsberg, but it stayed German. In the 1930s, the Nazis turned Königsberg into a fortress city. But in World War II, disaster hit. In 1944, the British Air Force bombed the city, nearly destroying the old town and leaving churches, townhouses, and the castle in ruins. Only a few districts survived, including the Ammerlinau district, a residential area with Art Nouveau villas. Traces of old Königsberg can still be found in Kaliningrad today.
You have to imagine the whole center and Königsberg as a whole were extremely bombed here during World War II, but this district was largely spared. There were no interesting targets here, so they didn't need to bomb them. That's why all the German villas of those who lived here back then are still standing today. The upper middle class used to live here. Professors,
Civil servants.
or generally wealthy entrepreneurs.
You can still see all the mansions here.
The country houses and so on. It's really impressive. I think even nowadays, like, the upper class still lives here, I would say, in that sense. Everything is very well preserved, and now I see what the woman meant when she said the Germans built something high quality here. And yes, it's really magnificent. Here you have Art Nouveau facades, and some buildings also have that typical country house facade. Here's proof, guys, 1909, so this house was built before World War I. These villas are really impressive. This German district even offers large tourist tours, showing Russian interest in German history. But yeah, it's cool to see. This existed in the 19th century, built like this. What remained after the war? Here too, the small center with all the restaurants and little shops really doesn't look bad. So I think if you want to live in Karlinen right now, this is definitely one of the top areas. Of course, you need a thick wallet because most of the houses are just villas. But yeah, if you have money, I think this is definitely a top address here. You saw it, guys? Chapter 2 has begun, the Soviet turn. Our German ancestors had a certain fondness for detail. You can see this attention to detail in Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, and here in Kaliningrad. The buildings, the houses that were built. When the Russians took over Kaliningrad, a Soviet flair entered the city. And many say the city has lost a bit of its shine. That means if you walk out a bit now, you immediately see those classic Soviet block buildings, which of course really worsen the cityscape. First, I need to explain how it all became Soviet and share some history. After
the 1945 surrender, Königsberg was given to the Soviet Union, the German population. More than 300,000 people were expelled or deported in the years that followed. Russian, Belarusian and Ukrainian settlers took their place and built a completely new city. In 1946, Königsberg received a new name, Kaliningrad, named after the Soviet politician Mikhail Kalinin. The Soviet authorities left hardly anything of the old churches, townhouses and even the castle. They were supposed to disappear because they reminded people of the German past. Instead, wide streets, Soviet prefabricated buildings and monumental administrative buildings were built. Kaliningrad became a closed military city and a key Red Army and naval base on the Baltic Sea. For decades, the city was entirely closed to foreigners.
Despite these Soviet block buildings, one has to say that the city has managed to maintain a certain natural feel to keep the city green. You can see it, there are already generously designed parks and so on. That has been done really well. But of course, otherwise you definitely notice the strong Russian influence. Yeah, I think so. What do you call these buildings again? Khrushchevkas. Russians, what do you call these block buildings? Comment below. It's interesting to see this German reconstructed center and the Soviet one. Communist architecture all around it. And guys, you have to think about it too. I'm here in Kaliningrad, the capital of the Kaliningrad Oblast. There are many other cities in this part of Russia where you can visit the sea, but in this video, I'm only showing you the city. There are also beautiful areas outside this city. Many people go to the Baltic Sea, and many also travel to the more rural areas here in Kaliningrad. This part of the city is also key when discussing the Soviet takeover, because the Königsberg city castle used to stand here. Behind me, there was a beautiful castle. I'll show you some pictures now so you can get an impression of what it all looked like. It was a city highlight and a real eye-catcher. This castle was bombed in World War II and no longer existed afterward. For years the ruins were still here, which you could look at as remnants, as relics of that time. Now all of that has been planted over and removed. Today nothing remains of this city palace. You could once see a few remains here, but not anymore. It's mainly a parking lot here and, well, a green area, so unfortunately there's nothing left at all. You may wonder why the Soviets didn't rebuild this city palace after World War II. The Soviets saw this city palace as a personification of narcissism, as a personification of the Nazi era. Imagine, in a sense, swastika flags once flew at this palace, and that was still during the war, of course also before the war. That's why the Soviets chose not to rebuild the palace, replacing it with an unattractive government building. I'll show it to you now. Now you can see what the whole thing looked like. So, it was basically placed next to and on top of the palace. Crazy, guys, isn't it? For a long time, that symbolized the city too, the blend of German and Soviet architecture. This government building stood in the city center. But now it looks like this. That means not only are the ruins of the city palace gone, but the foundation of this monster is now no longer visible either. This building has only been gone from the city for a few years. And the locals affectionately called it the robot head, called it a monster, and in a way, it also had a few sympathy points. People somehow found it funny. There were a few inside jokes about this building, which no longer exists. But in any case, it was reduced to rubble and ashes. But it's also important to say that this building was never completed. Why? We started the construction, but didn't finish it. Before the end of the Soviet Union collapsed, and then it just stood here empty for decades. That means a useless building in the heart of the city belonged to a private company. First, the building had to be repurchased before demolition could proceed. Now we have a mess, right? Personally, I don't think it's so bad that the whole thing was demolished, because this way you can make space for something new. A lot is already being planned, including Studio 44 new green spaces and facilities in the city center will nicely complement it. So soon, at least I think so, it will then... This beautiful project will be in the city, and yes, I'm excited. That would be great, of course. So you've replaced this useless building with something better. I still think they could have left the castle ruins. They may be useless now, but they still have historical value. Of course, you just need to make space.
Kaliningrad, or also Königsberg, a place where German and Russian identities meet. A place that shows us remembrance matters, and that our future depends on finding peace and unity.